Listen carefully. Sometimes the face that appears untouched by time is not a blessing but a burden. And sometimes the gift that the whole world envies hides a sorrow too deep for words. Do not be quick to admire what shines from a distance, for the brightest jewel may conceal the deepest crack. Stay with this story until its final breath, and you will discover that no treasure is greater than a humble heart that walks in truth. This is another tale from the circle of old stories that have traveled from one generation to the next. Stories that remind us that every choice is a seed, every seed becomes a harvest, and every harvest reveals what was hidden beneath the soil all along. Once upon a time, beyond a chain of blue mountains where the morning mist rested upon the valleys, like soft white wool, there stood the ancient kingdom of Arando. Its rivers sang over polished stone. Its forests stretched so wide that birds could spend an entire season flying beneath their emerald roofs. The marketplace overflowed with fragrant bread, warm honey cakes, woven baskets, bright cloths dyed with flowers, and the laughter of merchants who greeted one another like old friends. Bells echoed from stone towers every dawn, calling the people to give thanks before beginning another day beneath the generous sky. The kingdom was ruled by King Aldrin, a just man whose beard had turned silver through years of faithful service, and Queen Elira, whose kindness was spoken of wherever travelers gathered around evening fires. Kingdom possessed fertile fields, peaceful roads, and strong walls. The greatest joy of the royal household was neither gold nor victory. It was their only daughter. She was called Princess Lysara. When she was born, the bells rang for 3 days and 3 nights. Bakers filled the streets with sweet loaves. Shepherds carried lambs adorned with ribbons. Mothers lifted their children so they could witness the royal procession passing through the city gates. An old pilgrim watched the celebration from the edge of the square. His cloak was patched, his sandals were worn, his walking staff had been polished smooth by many years upon dusty roads. As the procession passed, he whispered quietly, almost too softly for anyone to hear, "May heaven guard the child from gifts that ask too great a price." Only one little girl heard him. She was Mira, the daughter of the palace gardener. She looked up at the old traveler with wide eyes. "What do you mean?" she asked. But the pilgrim merely smiled, touched her forehead gently, continued walking until the crowd swallowed him from sight. The words faded from everyone's memory, everyone except Mira. Years passed as gently as drifting leaves. Princess Lisara grew into a child whose laughter seemed to chase away clouds. He wandered through the palace gardens, gathering wild flowers instead of jewels. She knew the names of the stable horses and greeted the kitchen servants before greeting visiting nobles. Every evening she slipped away from the grand halls to carry warm bread to widows living beyond the eastern gate. The people adored her. Whenever she smiled from the palace balcony, hope spread through the city like sunlight breaking after rain. Then came her 16th birthday. Delegations arrived from distant kingdoms. Musicians filled the palace with melodies carried by flutes and gentle drums. Candles illuminated every window until the castle appeared like a mountain of stars. At the height of the celebration, when music softened and every voice fell silent, an unfamiliar woman entered the great hall. No guard remembered opening the gate. No servant remembered announcing her name. Yet there she stood. She appeared older than the oldest grandmother and younger than the youngest maiden, all at once. Her silver robe shimmered without reflecting the firelight. Around her neck hung a chain woven from leaves that never wilted. In her hands, she carried no gift, only a single white rose. The guest stepped aside. Even the king felt unable to speak. The mysterious visitor bowed before Princess Lysara. My child, she said gently, beauty fades, kingdoms crumble, even mountains become dust. Yet today I offer you a blessing no earthly crown can purchase. The hall became perfectly still. You shall never grow old. Gasps swept across the room. The queen covered her mouth. The nobles stared with amazement. The youngest guest smiled with delight. Only King Aldrin frowned. He asked quietly, every blessing carries wisdom. What wisdom accompanies this one? The woman answered with a smile that revealed both kindness and sadness. Time itself will decide. Then she placed the white rose into Lysara's hands. The flower never lost a single petal. Before anyone could speak again, the woman was gone. Not a door opened, not a curtain moved. She simply was no longer there. The celebration continued, but the music never sounded quite the same. The following morning, the servants searched every road leading from the capital. No traveler had seen such a woman. No innkeeper remembered her. No horse had carried her. It was as though the wind itself had borrowed human form for a single evening. Life returned to its ordinary rhythm, or so everyone believed. The seasons marched onward. Spring painted the orchards white. Summer covered the fields in gold. Autumn scattered crimson leaves across the castle paths. Winter wrapped every rooftop in silver. 1 year passed, then 5, then 10. King Aldran's shoulders bent beneath the weight of years. Queen Elira's hair became soft as fresh snow. Children who had once played beside Princess Lysara now held children of their own. Yet the princess remained exactly the same. Her eyes shone with youthful light. Her face bore no wrinkle. Her hands remained smooth. Her voice sounded as gentle as the day she turned 16. Visitors crossed oceans simply to see her. Some called her heaven's chosen. Others called her the blessed rose. Poets composed psalms praising her eternal youth. Artists painted portraits that seemed unable to capture her radiance. The kingdom prospered under the wonder. Pilgrims left flowers outside the palace walls. Coins poured into the marketplaces. Merchants declared that the princess herself had become the kingdom's greatest treasure. But treasures often attract dangerous hearts. Far beyond the northern forests lived a scholar named Coven. He spent his life searching forgotten temples and abandoned libraries for secrets hidden from ordinary men. He had studied kings who sought immortality. He had translated scrolls blackened by centuries of dust. He had listened to old sailors tell stories whispered only after midnight. Again and again, one warning appeared. Nothing in this world escapes its price. When Corvain heard of the princess who never aged, he closed his oldest book with trembling hands. Inside its faded pages rested an illustration of a white rose, exactly like hers. Beneath the drawing, the bloom fits where forgotten sorrow quietly gathers. Coven's heart grew heavy. He began the long journey toward Arandor. Back in the capital, life continued with songs and celebrations. Yet small things had begun to change. Things too small for most people to notice. The palace birds no longer built nests near Princess Lysara's window. Flowers she picked wilted before sunset. Dogs wagged their tails for everyone else, but whimpered softly whenever she approached. No one understood why. Everyone dismissed such things as coincidence. Everyone except Mira. Now, grown into a young woman, she still tended the royal gardens just as her father once had. She noticed every leaf, every blossom, every changing breeze. She remembered the pilgrim. One quiet evening, she watched the princess walk barefoot among the lilies. The setting sun painted everything with warm amber light. Yet something troubled her. Princess Lysara cast no shadow across the garden path. Mira blinked. Surely her eyes had deceived her. She stepped behind an olive tree and looked again. The trees had shadows. The fountain had a shadow. Even the smallest butterfly, resting upon a rose, cast a tiny shape upon the stones. But the princess, nothing, only sunlight. Mira felt a chill despite the warmth of the evening. She told no one. Who would believe the gardener's daughter against the beloved princess? Days later, she noticed another strange thing. Each morning, the princess carried fresh bread to the poor beyond the eastern gate, just as she always had. She smiled. She listened to their stories. She embraced grieving mothers. She comforted lonely old men. Yet, after every visit, someone in that neighborhood quietly fell ill. Not immediately, not dramatically. It's enough for whispers to begin. A baker lost his strength. A fisherman could no longer lift his nets. A widow who had always sung while sweeping her doorstep stopped opening her shutters altogether. People blamed changing weather. Others blamed old age. No one connected these sorrows to the princess's kindness. How could they? She seemed goodness itself. Still, Mira watched, and she prayed beneath the oldest cedar in the royal garden. Heaven, she whispered, if my heart is fearful without reason, forgive me. But if there is truth hidden when no one wishes to look, grant me patience until the proper time. The evening wind moved gently through the branches. One white rose, growing where none had ever bloomed before, slowly opened beneath the cedar tree. Mira had never planted it. She stared at the impossible flower as twilight settled over the kingdom. The old pilgrim's words returned to her as clearly as though he stood beside her once again. May heaven guard the child from gifts that ask too great a price. Mystery had begun, but no one yet understood how dearly the kingdom would soon be asked to pay. The days became weeks, and the weeks quietly gathered into months. Outwardly, the kingdom of Arandod remained as peaceful as ever. The markets were still crowded with cheerful voices. Children still chased one another through the narrow streets, and every evening the palace windows glowed with warm candlelight. Yet beneath that familiar peace, an unseen shadow stretched a little farther with each passing season. Princess Lisara never changed. Not a single silver hair appeared upon her head. Not a single line touched her face. Meanwhile, King Aldran's hands trembled as he signed royal decrees, and Queen Elira walked more slowly than before, leaning upon an ivory cane carved by the finest craftsmen in the kingdom. Many called the princess a miracle. A few began to wonder. One rainy afternoon, the traveling scholar Corvin finally arrived at the capital. His cloak was soaked from the long road, and dust still clung to his boots. Instead of seeking a warm meal, he went first to the great library beside the palace chapel. The oldest keeper of the books welcomed him. You have traveled far, the old librarian said. I have, Corvin replied. I seek only one answer. For 3 days he searched forgotten scrolls, faded maps, and crumbling journals. At last he uncovered a weathered page that spoke of a mysterious gift called the bloom of unending youth. Its final line chilled him. When time is denied its rightful course, it quietly gathers from the lives of others. Coven closed the book. The room seemed colder than before. At that very hour, Mira tended the palace gardens. The strange white rose beneath the cedar had grown larger, though she had never watered it. Around it, every other flower appeared weaker, as if their color had been gently drawn away. She knelt and whispered a prayer. Lord, give me wisdom before fear speaks louder than truth. Just then, she noticed Princess Lysara approaching. The princess smiled as kindly as ever. The roses are beautiful this year, she said. They are, Mira answered, though her eyes lingered on the unnatural bloom. For the first time, she noticed something else. The white rose seemed to lean toward the princess, not with the movement of the wind, but as though it recognized her. That night, Queen Elira fell gravely ill. The royal physicians worked until dawn, yet none could explain her sudden weakness. They spoke of exhaustion, of age, of burdens carried too long. Only Corvin, standing quietly outside the chamber, whispered to himself, "The harvest has begun." The mystery was no longer growing in silence. It had reached the palace itself. Listen closely, for the darkest hour often comes just before the dawn, and the truth that many fear to speak is sometimes the very truth that can save a people. Those who love deeply must also be willing to see clearly. Kindness without wisdom may walk blindly into danger, but kindness guided by truth becomes a light that no darkness can overcome. Queen Elira's illness spread sorrow through every corner of Arundel. The palace musicians laid aside their instruments. The marketplace grew quieter than anyone could remember. Bakers still warmed their ovens before sunrise, and blacksmiths still struck glowing iron upon their anvils. Yet laughter seemed to have disappeared like birds before a storm. Every household prayed for the beloved queen, while Princess Lysara remained faithfully at her mother's bedside, holding her frail hand and speaking gentle words of comfort. Still, the queen grew weaker. King Aldran scarcely left her chamber. His once powerful voice had become soft with worry, and every night he knelt beside the palace chapel, asking heaven to spare the woman who had shared his throne and his heart for so many years. Meanwhile, Corvin sought out Mira beneath the old cedar tree. "I believe you have noticed the signs," he said quietly. Mira lowered her eyes. "I pray that I was mistaken." "So did I," Corvin answered. He unfolded the weathered page he had carried from the library. "It says the gift of endless youth never creates life. It only borrows it, as long as the enchanted one remains unchanged. Time is quietly gathered from those who live nearby." Mira's heart sank. Then the Princess Corvin shook his head gently. "I do not believe she chose this burden. She has been living inside a blessing that became a prison." At that moment, a palace servant hurried into the garden. "The queen asks for Princess Lysara," he cried. They followed him without delay. Inside the royal chamber, Queen Elira's breathing was slow and shallow. She smiled weakly when her daughter entered. "My child," she whispered, "you have always been my greatest joy." Tears filled Lysara's eyes. "I would give anything to see you well again." The old queen reached up with trembling fingers and touched her daughter's face. "There are gifts that must be surrendered before they become chains." Those words settled over the room like falling snow. Princess Lysara looked from her mother to Corvin, then to Mira, whose sorrowful face revealed that a truth had been hidden for far too long. "What do you know?" the princess asked. For a long moment, no one answered. Then Corvin stepped forward. He told her everything. He spoke of the ancient writings. He spoke of the white rose. He spoke of the missing shadow. Most of all, he spoke of the terrible price that eternal youth demanded. The princess listened without interrupting. When he finished, silence filled the chamber. Finally, she bowed her head. "If this is true," she whispered, "then every year I remained young. Someone else carried the years that should have been mine." No one answered. They did not need to. Lysara quietly removed the white rose that she had kept beside her bed since her 16th birthday. Its petals were as fresh as the day it had been given. She carried it alone into the palace garden. The moon hung above the cedar tree. The strange white rose growing beneath it glowed faintly in the darkness. Princess Lysara knelt, with tears upon her face. She lifted her eyes toward heaven. I accepted this gift without understanding its cost. If my youth has become another's burden, I surrender it freely. Let time return to its rightful path. Let those who have suffered be restored, even if I must grow old before the morning comes. The night wind stirred. The two white roses began to tremble. One by one, their petals loosened and drifted into the air like falling snow. The earth itself seemed to sigh. Then everything became still. When the first light of dawn touched the palace walls, Mira hurried into the garden. There sat Princess Lysara. Her golden hair now carried gentle threads of silver. Soft lines rested upon her face. Her hands looked older, yet never had she seemed more beautiful. She smiled peacefully for the first time in many years. She cast a shadow. At that same hour, Queen Elira opened her eyes with new strength. The bells of Arandor rang once again. Hope had returned. The people gathered in the great square as King Odren spoke openly before the kingdom. There is no blessing worth keeping if it steals life from another. Today we honor not endless youth, but the courage to choose truth over comfort. The crowd bowed their heads. Many wept, many gave thanks. And from that day forward, the white rose became the symbol of humble sacrifice rather than endless beauty. Even now, travelers who pass through the Old Kingdom say an ancient cedar still stands in the royal garden. Every spring, a single white rose blooms beneath its branches, reminding all who see it that appearances can deceive, but a willing and truthful heart can restore what pride and fear have broken. The first truth is this: every gift must be weighed with wisdom. The second truth is this: hidden sacrifices always come to light. The third truth is this: a humble heart that chooses what is right is more precious than beauty that never fades. So, if you ever find yourself envying what another person possesses, remember Princess Lysara. Remember that only heaven knows the true cost of every blessing. Walk faithfully, love generously, and never trade truth for comfort. The end. But let the lesson never fade from your heart.